Hello, welcome to Wilson's Barbecue. In this video, I'm going to be cooking up this tiny little rack of spare ribs from Ocado. If you watched my last video, you would have seen that I cooked a brisket point end from Sainsbury's supermarket here in the UK. And whilst I was doing my weekly shopping online at Ocado, which is an online supermarket, I came across these suggested pork spare ribs. So I thought, well, maybe I can do a bit of a series on cooking supermarket meats, just to see how they turn out. I needed to test a new flavour profile for my ribs for my pop-up, and rather than spending a lot of money on a rack of ribs that I would normally sell, for £3.83, I thought I'd just get these and we get to see how they turn out. So we're gonna cook them on the PK today. So this cook is really just gonna be about the flavour. I've got a new sauce that I wanna try out, and as I say, I'm constantly testing ribs for different flavours and stuff, and this is just a really cheap way to do it. And I thought it might be interesting to some. So we've got our small rack of spare ribs. As you can see here, you've got the kind of skirt here, and then it's full spares would be longer, St. Louis cut. So they've just trimmed them nice and small. So I don't know if they're gonna be any good, but we'll give them a go. So we're gonna go with Derby style ribs, Goldies. You're gonna go black pepper and Lowry's seasoning salt. A nice even coat of black pepper on the top. Thinking about the presentation, and we're putting the pepper on first, just so the powderiness of the Lowry's doesn't stop the pepper from sticking. Got a couple of shiners here where the bones are coming through. Thicker this end, thinner this end, and for £3, I'm not too fussed. So let's get the PK warmed up. These will just sit here for a moment, and then we'll get them on. So we got this vent here open underneath the coals. Air's going to come through and come out of here. It's a little bit smoky at the moment because I think my charcoal is a little bit damp. We've got some seasoned oak wood here which I've just sawed up, and once this comes up to temperature, we will get the ribs on and put a chunk of wood on. PK's up to temperature, so we will get these on now. So we're going to put them on the side where the probe is. Chunk of wood or two. So we're in direct cooking. We've got our coals here, a few chunks of wood, ribs here, and we'll probably come back, probably check it in about 3 hours. So we're running at about 275 Fahrenheit. This is where I like to cook my ribs, 275 to 300, and I like to really render down that fat. So just a quick one about how I cook my ribs. I like to cook them pretty much unwrapped the entire way. I feel like you get a much better result in the end. If you cook them unwrapped the whole way, you start to render out more of that fat, and you get a kind of texture which is more like a roast pork belly. So where the fat really kind of renders down and becomes buttery, really melts in the mouth. I might wrap them just to kind of finish them off if they're starting to dry out before the fat's fully rendered. But more often than not, I'll cook them unwrapped the whole way through and then sauce them at the end, wrap them up in tin foil and just let them rest. If you haven't done this before and you're more used to wrapping in tin foil to finish them off, give it a go. See if you can cook them all the way unwrapped. Maybe 15 minutes or so at the end, and see if you like the texture. And drop a comment below if you give it a try and if you enjoy it. Right, so I said I have a new barbecue sauce glaze recipe that I want to try out, so here it is. So I've got my homemade barbecue sauce. There's a link to how I make this just above. So I'm gonna go in with about 50% barbecue sauce, and this is pretty sweet. And then I'm gonna go in with another part, so equal parts apple cider vinegar. And that's pretty much the rib glaze that I've been using for a while. But I'm just gonna add in about half a part maple syrup, just to add a little bit of sweetness. And that vinegar mixes with the fat and the salt, and it works really, really well on ribs. Very kind of Texas style, and already just with tasting that on my finger, I know that it needs a little bit more maple syrup. It's got a nice vinegar taste, sweetness from the barbecue sauce, extra sweetness and kind of darkness, richness from the maple syrup. I think that's going to work perfectly on these ribs. And also that maple syrup is going to give it a nice kind of sugary glaze, like a glossiness, which is good for presentation. So we'll go check on the ribs, and it might be time to glaze. So these have been in for 4.5 hours, and the colour's looking real nice on them. Fat's rendering out really nice, and just check the tenderness using the Thermopen. And so how I check the tenderness for ribs is I use the weight of the Thermopen to go in between the bone, and if the weight of the Thermopen will take it through but it gets resistance just where the Thermopen gets thicker, that's pretty much perfect for me. Temp wise, I don't know, temp wise they're 199, so pretty much bang on. Yeah, so weight of the Thermapen should go all the way through, but it should stop when the Thermapen gets thicker. So these are pretty much done. Let's glaze them up for 15 minutes. No, 20 minutes, and these are looking good. So let's get them inside and get them rested. So the ribs are off. Hopefully you can see the colour on them. I'm pretty happy with the colour. It's kind of dark in here. So these are cooked, these are done. We're gonna let them rest, but first we're gonna set them down in a little more of that glaze. We're gonna go meat side down, a little bit more of that glaze on top, wrap them up. So we're giving them a tight wrap, and we'll just let them cool down, kind of sit in the resting juices. The fat plus the sauce should kind of emulsify a little bit, result in a nice kind of sauce juice to serve them with. So we'll let them rest for 20 minutes and then we'll come back, slice into them, see how they are. Right, so it's been 20 minutes. Let's get these opened up and slice into them. We'll get those in there. And there you go. We'll slice them and see how the glaze tastes. Kind of juicy, so let's bite into one. So there's not a lot of meat on them, there's hardly any meat at all, but I'm really enjoying that vinegar, barbecue sauce and additional maple syrup. The additional maple syrup just, yeah, makes the sauce a little bit more glossy, kind of got more of a sheen to it, almost like an emulsified oil-based sauce. So it's holding together, it's not mushy or anything like that, but the meat just falls off. All that fat is rendered down nicely, it just melts in between your fingers. For me, these ribs are cooked perfectly. Every little bit of it is edible, the fat's well rendered. But yeah, huge bones, huge thick bones, not a lot of meat. You may have noticed that I didn't take the membrane off. I don't take the membrane off my ribs. I just don't think there's a need when you cook them hot. The way I do and unwrapped pretty much all the way, yeah, you don't really need to. It's nice and crispy and it's definitely edible. For £3.80, they're not bad. Good salt levels with the Lowry's. Nice amount of pepper. Really happy with that glaze. We'll definitely be doing that again. So give this recipe a try, definitely do it. The pepper, the Lowry's, my barbecue sauce recipe with the apple cider vinegar, plus some maple syrup. Make some ribs, let me know how you get on with it. It's my favourite way to do ribs, and that's how I'm going to be selling them at my pop-ups going forward. In terms of the Ocado ribs themselves, I wouldn't order them again. There's barely any meat on them. They were really useful today just for a little bit of a test. The flavour of the pork was okay, but it was difficult to tell all the seasonings on, but I wouldn't recommend them. So if you like this video, please give me a follow, like, subscribe, go follow me on Instagram, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks for another video.